All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. I've said it before and I will say it again, and that is Philadelphia Eagles Executive VP of Football Operations, Howie Roseman, continues to play chess while the rest of the NFL plays checkers when it comes to the league's draft. Now, it's just been 2.5 months, since the Philadelphia Eagles, dominated the Kansas City Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. And, they were right back at it this past weekend at the draft. And it's not just what the Eagles do at the draft, it's their ability to draft well, find guys for their system, and keep the machinery going. And of course, you can strive to be a champion every single year. It's not going to happen like that in the grand scheme of sports. But you think about the Philadelphia Eagles, they're right there basically every year. They're right there in that mix. 7 of that last 8 years have seen the Eagles be a playoff team. And two of those years saw them win a Super Bowl. 3 of those years saw them get to a Super Bowl. And how do you do it? Because it's not always going to be about trades. It's not always going to be about free agency. It's about your ability to draft. And I think the Eagles once again hit a home run this past weekend at the draft. The first 5 picks by the Eagles over the weekend were used on defensive players. And if anybody remembers what the Eagles just did to the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, you know that it was their defense that set the tone in that contest. Round one saw Philadelphia swap picks with the Kansas City Chiefs to move up to 31, and they took Alabama linebacker Jahad Campbell. And I guarantee you, um, the folks in Philly, in the South Jersey area, they're gonna fall in love with this kid. Why? Because Jahad Campbell will tackle anything within the same zip code. And you think about the factory, if you will, that former Alabama head coach Nick Saban had at linebacker during this time there. I always talked about, and I still talk about, because some of them have come out in this draft, the Nick Saban effect on his linebackers and his DBs throughout the years coming out of Alabama. And I think Jahad Campbell has the potential to have a solid NFL career and come out and have a solid impact for this Philadelphia Eagles team very early on. Now, Campbell led Alabama in tackles in each of the last 2 years, which included him being first team All SEC in 2024. Now, Campbell was born in New Jersey, and now he'll be playing for a team that's only about an hour from where he grew up in the Garden State. You think about the Eagles and their affinity to get Georgia players, especially on the defensive side of the football. And it really wouldn't be a draft for the Eagles if they didn't draft somebody from Kirby Smart's Georgia program. And look no further than late in round number 5 when the Eagles took linebacker Smile London Jr. And, I just think Smile London Jr., it's one of those where middle linebackers, unfortunately, are undervalued right now in the current scheme of things in the National Football League. They're kind of like running backs. We're starting to see that tide turn for the running backs, but nonetheless, Small London Jr. is going to be an impact player long term for the Philadelphia Eagles. Like I said, their first 5 picks were used on defensive players. Round number 2, Andrew Makuba, the safety out of Texas. The fourth round saw them take Ty Robinson, a defensive tackle out of Nebraska. Mac McWilliams in the 5th round out of UCF, like I said, Smile London. And then they also came back in round number 6 and got edge rusher Antoine Powell Ryland, along with a couple of offensive tackles in the 6th round. Miles Hinton out of Michigan and Cameron Williams out of Texas. And you can't overlook the 5th round because the Eagles had 3 picks in that round. They also got Drew Kendall, the center out of Boston College. And then in round number 6, Kyle McCord, the quarterback from Syracuse. So if you look at this draft for the Philadelphia Eagles. It was all about them adding depth, and they already are a deep team. And this right here will allow them to keep the machinery going because when you win and win championships, it's not easy to go out there and re-sign everybody. Okay, but you have to have somebody waiting in the wings. You have to treat it almost like a college program, and that's what the Eagles have. They have a program. They're able to draft guys. You don't necessarily have to put them out there right away as starters. They can get spots and then they can also develop. And they have a great development program, like I said before, which allows them to keep the machinery going. And I think this draft will allow them to do that. It's not something where the Eagles went out there and got over the top, you know, impact players of that sort. No, but they still were able to find guys who are going to be impact players in their system. This was going to be a draft for the Eagles overall, in my opinion. It might not show up here in 2025. I think Jahad Campbell is going to have an opportunity to make an impact, but it's not going to be a draft that's going to show up right away. It's going to be a draft that's going to show up in 2 or 3 years for the Philadelphia Eagles and then their fan base, and people in the Philadelphia area are going to sit back and say and sit back and look at it like, you know what, this was a solid class that came in because I think the Eagles are definitely going to find out of the guys that they drafted over the weekend in Green Bay. I'd say 2 or 3 impact players at least are going to come out of this deal for Philadelphia in the next couple of years. But that's what it's all about because, again, when I talk about Howie Roseman and what he's able to excel at, it's not just about drafting guys. It's not just about drafting guys who can go out there and make an impact for you right away. It's about guys who are going to make an impact for you in several years, and that's a credit to him, and it's also a credit to his scouting department for them to be able to see the long term vision. And again, they've drafted well, and they've been able to draft depth for years. So because of that, if you're Philadelphia, you don't have to go out there and necessarily make a reach in the draft, which is a luxury that they've been able to do. And like I've said it before, and I'll say it again, generally most of the teams that are picking early on in the rounds of the NFL draft don't know what they're doing. So if you're Philly, a team like Philly who's been consistently picking late, you can have guys drop to you who should have been going earlier, and it just makes your job a little bit easier. This is why you see the Philadelphias, the Baltimores, the Buffaloes, the Kansas Cities consistently picking late in the draft because some of the teams in front of them really don't know what they're doing. And of course, a guy like Howie Roseman knows what he's doing in Philly. But nonetheless, another solid trip to the draft for the Philadelphia Eagles. And like I said, the long term impact for this draft class, I think, will prove itself to be positive in the city of brotherly love. But, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning in. And if you like what you heard and saw, please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Guarantee you it's greatly appreciated. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. Also, same goes for Instagram as I'm at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. And if you give me that follow, I'll follow you right back, guaranteed. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can check us out at the Sports Depot 365. And as always, in parting, once again, thanks for checking us out. My name is William Martin. I'm signing off and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.